Welcome to another episode of the Gull-Mouth Action podcast, where we take a look at all the latest goings on at Brighton Hove Albion and Crawley Town. I'm Matt Poll, and this week I'm joined by Sam Morton, who covers both Albion and the Reds, Brighton writer Henry Bryant, and Crawley Town expert Mark Dunford. Fabian Hurzeler was officially unveiled as Brighton and Hove Albion's new head coach today, replacing the history-making Roberto De Zerbi. We'll bring you all the headlines from the German's first press conference and bring you all the latest noise and confusion coming out of Crawley Town. You can read all the stories we are talking about with videos and pictures online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. And you can check out other great videos on shotstv.com and Freeview Channel 276. You may also be watching on Latest TV. So if you are, thank you very much for tuning in. But as mentioned at the top of the pod, Fabian Hurzeler was introduced to the Brighton media at his first press conference today. And you were there, Sam Morton. What were your first assessments?
Yeah, I thought he came across very well, actually, Matt. It was great to finally meet him after all this time of him being manager, and it was a packed press conference. I've never seen so many people at the Lancing training ground. Actually, obviously everyone's all excited to come and see the new manager and get that first glimpse and see what he's all about. And obviously there is a little bit of history, as he's the youngest Premier League manager in history at 31 years old, which makes him younger than quite a few of the players in the squad. And it probably annoyed him a little bit that so many questions were about his age, but he took them all very well, and gave some great answers, really, just about how age doesn't have any factor on kind of his footballing experience. And he's been a manager for 5.5 years, and he's got some great experience in that sense, because he did retire as a player at the age of 22, and he kind of revealed that's because he just knew he wasn't going to reach the heights of that he would kind of want to as a footballer. And he said that, for example, he could never play for Brighton, and he just thought there was no point continuing, and he thought he saw himself as more of a coach, and decided to pursue that a lot earlier than a lot of people do. So I think that's it's really exciting, really, just to have that at Brighton. Another little bit of history, and he spoke about how he has his own philosophy, and he doesn't want to copy Roberto De Zerbi, because he was asked about that, how he would differ from the Italian, and he was very quick to say he wants to be his own man and really bring his own footballing style to Brighton. And he said about how he watched most of Brighton's games last season. He was just glued to the TV watching the Premier League, and it's always been a dream of his to manage in the Premier League. I think he did actually one point say Brighton were one of the few clubs that could have persuaded him to leave St. Pauli, actually, because he was so happy there, and he was happy to stay there for another season after getting into the Bundesliga. But after getting the call from the Brighton, he couldn't say no, which is probably very good to hear for Brighton fans. And I guess I can't wait for the season to start to see how he gets on. But I think first impressions were really good. I thought he came across as a very good communicator, and he was there with Tony Bloom and Paul Barber, who kind of sat there as proud parents almost, just it really felt like that. And it was just, I think they're very excited with who they've appointed, and they couldn't say enough nice words about him. So yeah, very exciting.
And I'm sure that Albion's newest signing, Yankuba Minte, would have probably been a topic of conversation as well. Sam, what did you learn about Brighton's new boy?
Yeah, so he was mentioned quite early on. So a signing from Newcastle, although he'd never played in the Premier League, didn't have an appearance for Newcastle because he spent the season on loan at Feyenoord, and he had a very successful season with them. So I think it's another exciting signing for Brighton. 19 years old, and just another one onto the conveyor belt of young talent that Brighton have, and obviously Hurzeler will be looking to mould into his style of football. And it's difficult to say how well he will do. Obviously, as I've mentioned, he's not played in the Premier League before, but I think it just shows kind of the pedigree of Brighton, which was spoken about a little bit at the press conference as well. Just kind of how Brighton have got such a good history now of bringing players in from a young age and able to develop them into world beaters and sell them on for huge profits. So hopefully this is just another one that will be a great success, and good sign so far for him.
What do you make of the Minte signing, Henry? As an Albion fan, is that one to get excited about?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, looking at the highlights of him that you'll find on YouTube, he will just use his raw pace to take about 2 or 3 players out of the game and get Feyenoord into these dangerous areas that we've seen with the likes of Mitoma for the Albion as well. But he gives you that sort of vibe of what Jeremy Doku does for Manchester City when he comes on. and just gives you that sort of edge in getting the ball and literally running with it and getting it into the box. And I think that he's done really well in that aspect for Feyenoord while he's been on that loan spell. He scored 10 goals himself, and he got 6 assists in the 27 league appearances that he got. He is another winger. And although there's been a lot of speculation with Brighton players like the likes of Matoma maybe going elsewhere, it's always good to have a player of 19 years old who has been doing really well and has been a fan's favourite for the previous club he was at to, just step up and do really well in that aspect. He also participated in the 2023 AFCON. He played in the last 2 games of the group stages for Gambia. And as I mentioned, the fact that he's got that raw ability and so much potential is a really, really good one for Brighton fans to get excited about. Another one to look at for Brighton is Mats Wijfer, is another player that they're looking at the moment, who's a Netherlands international, another player from Feyenoord actually. Feyenoord looking for around £30 million. It's believed that Brighton have put an offer on the table just a little bit below that, and that has been in a rejection period, but Brighton are looking to get him as well. He's a defensive midfielder who's had 29 starts for the club last season with 5 goals and 3 assists. He's also 6'2", so he's quite an imposing figure. And if we're looking at the likes of Pascal Gross, that's got a lot of interest now from a number of clubs, including Borussia Dortmund, that are looking for his signature in this summer transfer window, it would be another key signing that the Albion need to sort of strengthen up, especially with the likes of Keenan Dewsbury Hall that we thought was coming to the Albion, not coming through. That deal was for around £24 million, and Jakub Moder also being involved in a swap deal, the Polish international there. That didn't happen. Now Chelsea have got him again. More reason for Brighton fans to hate Chelsea.
Chelsea.
More reason. But I believe that, he could be an exciting one. And one quick mention is the 21-year-old centre mid from Paraguay, who's been doing really well, called Diego Gomez, who's had the pleasure of playing with the likes of Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, and Sergio Busquets as well.
We'll come back to Dewsbury Hall in a minute. But going back to the Minto transfer, Sam, he joins Brighton from Newcastle for £30 million. How do you view this as a piece of business? Admittedly, this might be showing my ignorance, but I'd never heard of him. Do you think 30 million represents quite a lot of money? Do you think it's a bit of a gamble, or is it another unearthed gem that Brighton have discovered?
I suppose time will tell with it, really. But it is a lot of money for someone that I've personally not seen a lot of. But it does seem a sale that Newcastle may not have wanted to make if it wasn't for their financial situation, because it had been reported that they needed to ease their difficulties with the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules, and they would leave themselves open to a points deduction for next season if they failed to make sufficient sales before the June 30th reporting deadline. So it maybe suggests that they kind of had no choice, and 30 million they couldn't turn down for a player that didn't have any Premier League experience. And at the end of the day, if any club is going to take someone with that Premier League experience and turn them into a world beater, it's Brighton. And I think that the more Brighton sign these players and the better they do, the more it's going to keep happening. And Brighton are going to be seen as this team to go to develop. And you may see that 2 ways and say that they're being used as a stepping stone club, but that's the way it is, I think, at the moment for Brighton. And that's been so positive and successful for them and getting to where they are. So I don't see them changing that anytime soon. So obviously he's a Ghana international that impressed for Feyenoord last season. So just fingers crossed he can replicate that. And obviously it's a club record signing for Brighton. It does exceed the amount spent for João Pedro. So I think that shows how much they value him probably as a player to spend that kind of money, because Brighton are not necessarily known for splashing the cash.
It's crazy, isn't it? That much money on someone who hasn't played in the Premier League. It's just mad.
Well, I think it just goes to show the sheer amount of money that is in the Premier League these days, isn't it? Really, if you can have not to be disparaging, but a mid-table club spending £30 million on a player with little to no Premier League experience, it does seem that there's clubs with more money than sense, in my opinion. I don't know if other people agree with that.
I do. I think, absolutely.
But final question on the press conference, Sam. What were the other main takeaways? It does sounds like you've been impressed by what you've seen and heard from Brighton's new boss. You're on mute.
Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, no, I think exactly that. Was very impressed, really, kind of how when he came across, kind of his style, ideas for Brighton, and he was able to have a bit of a laugh and joke. I think there was a question towards the end where I asked him kind of what games he's most looking forward to in the season, and he kind of said he's looking forward to all of them. We kind of looked at Tony Bloom and said, I know which ones he wants me to win the most, kind of thing. So he's clearly got a sense of humour and very charismatic. And obviously we know who he's referring to and what he was saying without actually saying in Crystal Palace. So I think that's great. It shows he knows the club, knows the traditions, knows what games the fans want him to win the most. So I think that's really positive, and it shows he's got kind of bigger ambitions as well, because he spoke a little bit about how he looked up to Jurgen Klopp as being another German, and spoke about how his style differs, and how young managers in Germany look up to Klopp and other German managers that have been in the Premier League. So yeah, I think all the signs are very positive, and it's clear that he's going to fit into that analytical, data-led approach that Brighton have. And he spoke about the importance of that, and how he also wanted to keep Brighton's coaching staff on board. He didn't want to bring a load of his team and change things too much. He said he's a guest in England, and he wants the team that's already in place in Brighton to help him develop the club, and he can then start to bring his ethos and way of playing into the team. He has brought a couple of staff, and he's brought a goalkeeping coach across as well. So there was a funny moment actually as well where he was asked if he's going to do what De Zerbi did with the goalkeepers and rotate them, and he did keep his cards close to his chest in that sense. He didn't reveal what he was going to be doing, but I'd find it hard to believe he'd go down the same route, because I think that was one of the few mistakes that De Zerbi did make as Brighton manager. But yeah, I think the signs are very positive, and hopefully he gets off to a good start.
On that, Sam, you'd surely think it's Verbruggen who'd start as the number one next season.
I think so. Yeah, Jason still will be there as a backup and to provide experience and maybe play in some of the cup games. But I think Verbruggen has to be. He's starring for the Netherlands in the Euros. We'll get onto a little bit later. But yeah, I think Verbruggen definitely should be the number one. He's the right age to get even better, and he's only going to do that with games at the end of the day. I think he definitely has solidified his place as the number one Brighton goalkeeper.
Well, meanwhile, Brighton's our boss, Roberto De Zerbi, has a new job. He's landed at French club Marseille, who came up against Albion in last season's Europa League. How surprised were you by this announcement, Henry? I don't think many people were expecting him to land in France after who he was linked with at the end of last season.
And I think he must have been quite surprised as well. I think he must have seen a lot of what was going on around you, especially sort of in the Premier League as a manager who was doing relatively well with a club that wasn't expected to get any sort of European football, and for him to have reached that and basically got them to the highest point in their history. I think he was thinking that there was going to be a big step, especially with the likes of Vincent Kompany that's gone from Burnley to Bayern Munich. So there's a lot of reason for him to think that maybe there is a bigger job on the cards for him than Marseille. He wants to compete in a different way, was a lot of the sort of ways he was referring to himself, in a sense of getting a new club and wanting to sort of compete for trophies and wanting to go in that sort of way. In terms of Marseille, I mean, they're a club with a really rich history, and they compete in Europe on a season to season basis. So maybe that's something that De Zerbi is looking at and thinking, maybe this is something that I can utilize and maybe get some sort of success in that aspect. But overall, in terms of the way that things were going, it looked like he was going to be taking a bigger leap than that. We saw a lot of clubs in Italy that he was linked to as well, and he'd always sort of spoke about the fact that he wanted maybe a job back in Italy at some point. He even hinted at it in a few press conferences. So to see that he's gone from the sort of club of Brighton, who been able to do quite well against Marseille, and I'd say maybe outdo them in a few aspects of the games that they have played against each other. Those two games, I think that it's a very interesting one. No one really expected it, and I'm quite shocked, to be honest. I am quite shocked as an Albion supporter that has happened for him. I think that there were a few sort of meetings and rumours that were going along saying that he had a few meetings in Bayern Munich, actually. So I'm not sure what happened there. A lot of sources were saying that in terms of the sort of amount of staff that De Zerbi had, he had quite a lot of staff behind him. That was a big issue for a lot of clubs as well. So you just don't know what's happening behind the scenes. But yep, De Zerbi to Marseille, and time will tell to see how it goes.
I think he'll find it very difficult to win things, obviously, with PSG looming over his shoulder. But as you said, we shall see, Henry. You also, we spoke on Dewsbury Hall. He now looks to be on his way to Chelsea after he reportedly completed a medical at Albion. How big of a blow is this, Henry? It does seem to me that he's probably not going to get a sniff at Chelsea. What's the reasoning, do you think, behind his change of heart?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, because we see loads of players with this sort of potential to sort of have a solid first team role, go for bigger clubs. And I know that can work out at times, and we've seen that. But I think for him at the age of 25, he's at an age now where you wouldn't consider that as a young player in the aspect of the talent that Brighton have and other clubs in Europe have. I think that first team football would be a big priority for someone that age who's also come up the ranks with Leicester, from the Championship to the Premier League. I think it's going to be a massive blow, because it was someone that Brighton was looking at. I mean, even in the January transfer window, there were murmurs that he might be coming to the South Coast and leaving behind Leicester. I think the influence of Maresca as well going to Chelsea must have been a massive part in that. Jakob Moder was the player also involved in the swap deal, along with that £24 million, or thereabout that £24 million. And I think it's a case now of just looking at some of the targets that we mentioned previously. For example, Matt Weifer, who's been very good internationally, only missing out on the Euros this year due to injuries, but he's been really solid. Match ratings across the board have been around that high sort of 7, low 8 mark for most of his games. So someone that Brighton can really bounce back from in terms of that rejection from Dewsbury Hall, because it looked all but done. It looked like we were waiting for that social media announcement and everything to come out, really. And it was a bit of a gutter. It was a bit of a gutter.
Yeah, it seems odd that he seems to have swapped probably a starting place for Brighton to basically being a perennial bench warmer at Chelsea. But I'm sure he's earning enough money to not really care about that, is he?
If Chelsea offered me a bench warming job, I'd take it, to be honest.
Yeah. I imagine he'll probably be on twice the amount of money that he's on would be on at Brighton as well. So I'm sure he'll get over it quickly. We're also in the midst of the knockout stages at Euro 2024 and Copa America. There's a healthy Albion contingent involved in both competitions, isn't there, Henry? How are Brighton's players getting on this summer?
So talking about the man that may or may not be a Brighton player in the few sort of weeks that come, Dennis Undav came on in the last moments of the game for Germany against Hungary, and that was really good to see that he'd come on and made an appearance. I mean, he's done really well this season, making a lot of goal contributions and assists for VfB Stuttgart in the Bundesliga. In terms of if he'll be at the club this season coming, it's a case of if Brighton are prepared to combat that buyback clause that the German side have got, where they've got around £20 million to buy the player, and Brighton have a period of time to say, actually, we want to buy him back for maybe a few £1 million more. So we'll see. The player's been very confident that he'd like to stay in the Bundesliga, but time will tell. Moving on from that, you've got Lewis Dunk that hasn't featured yet for England, but could have a chance potentially maybe coming on as a substitute in the next game that's coming up against Switzerland. So it'll be interesting to see if he actually gets anything, any sort of game time in this Euro 2024 campaign.
Mark Gahey suspended, isn't he, for that Switzerland game? Do you think Dunk will come in for him, or to be Konza?
It's hard to know what Southgate's doing in general, let alone.
Leave him alone. Leave Crawley Southgate alone.
You wouldn't have been saying that though if we'd lost, Mark. So I really think it's a 50-50, because Lewis Dunk, although he's not had much international experience, he's just got a good pedigree to him, and I think that that would be a really nice addition to the team. I think Gahey's been really solid as well. I think it's worth mentioning that he's been absolutely fantastic. Billy Gilmore had an early exit with Scotland, but personally, I thought he had an exceptional game against Hungary when they lost that 1-0. I thought he was the only player actually getting them up the field and giving them that chance from going into that midfield to attack really, really well, and just sort of interlocking that Hungary defence at times, and just picking through some really good passes where on a different day it could have been a very different situation, maybe a history maker for Scotland there. I mean, yeah, it was a very interesting one, and the penalty decision as well got everyone sort of up in arms from Scotland. Julian and Ciso for Paraguay, they've got no points as of yet, and Tom McGill for Canada. He's not been needed for Canada as of yet, but he's still a backup, and they're still in the competition as well as Jeremy Sarmiento.
Tom McGill for Crawley Town, I think, wasn't he, Mark? If memory serves, he was on loan there.
Yeah, I think he was there at some point, wasn't he? Yeah, I was just thinking, I know that name.
What was he like for you guys? What was he like?
I don't know.
I don't think he ever played, Henry, if memory serves.
I don't think so, yeah.
Point. But yeah, it's very nicely segue into Crawley Town, who, after securing promotion to League One, most would probably expect the Reds to be building upon their existing squad, but that hasn't really been the case, has it, Mark? We could probably dedicate a whole podcast to this alone, but what on earth has been going on at the Broadfield Stadium?
Yeah, well, the last couple of weeks has been quite a whirlwind. I mean, when they announced their released and retained list, it wasn't that much of a shock. You had the likes of Jed Brown, Travis Johnson, Florian Castrati, etc. Harry Ransom was probably the biggest surprise in that list. And then you would have expected interest in some of the players from bigger clubs because of the season they had. Nick Cerullo was the first to leave, and you thought, yeah, I can understand that. He wasn't getting picked at the end of the season. By all accounts, I think they were negotiating with him, but he chose to leave. To go to Notts County. Then you had Adam Campbell, again, another one that made kind of sense. He did well for Crawley, but he came from the North East, and he's gone back there. He's playing for Hartlepool. And then it started to go a bit more, wait a minute, what's going on? Will Wright went to Swindon on a free, dropping down a division. I mean, Will Wright was the Crawley Observer player of the season. Thought he had a superb season, brilliant player, lovely bloke as well. And then it was they were on freeze. There was a bit of a with Will Wright, because they apparently had an option for another year, which is the club's prerogative to have that, to extend that option. But I don't know if they didn't take it or what went wrong with the negotiations there. But anyway, Swindon Town took advantage and got him on a free, which is an absolute bargain for them. But then and then it was just about 48 hours. It was Danilo Orsi, their top scorer, Corey Adai, arguably their player of the season and one of the reasons why they got promoted, and Clyde Lolos, the young player of the year, all went. So Orsi went to Burton for a fee, Corey Adai went to Stockport, Clyde Lolos to Bolton. Adai and Lolos going to Stockport and Bolton, they're two teams you'd imagine are going to be pushing for the title. Burton, I think, are one of the few teams tipped to finish lower than Crawley next year, and League One with all the bookmakers and that, but by all accounts they've got new owners, lots of money, etc. So it was just a surprise that the owners have just let these players go. I spoke to Scott Lindsay after the fixture release day breakfast, which was supposed to be this big positive day. Crawley find out who they've got in the thing. As I was writing up all the quotes and everything about how positive and what a great challenge is going to be, Orsi left, and the whole sort of mood changed between the fans and everything, and it was just a bit crazy. And I said to Lindsay about at that point it was only Cerullo, Wright, and Campbell, and he said, "Oh yeah, we didn't want to see them go, but money talks, etc., and all that." So he sort of accepted it. But then after those, I haven't spoken to Lindsay since. I have approached him, but I haven't been spoken to by the owners or Lindsay since those, because it's been quite a big deal. Those certainly Orsi, Adai, and Lolos within the space of 48 hours of each other. That was quite a big shock.
You've mentioned we'll say lack of reaction from the manager and the owner so far, but I imagine the supporters have had a few things to say about those departures. Mark, what's the mood like at the moment?
Oh, it was it was back to summer of 2022 after the owners took over and got everything. It was just, I mean, I don't like to use the word, but it did get quite toxic again on all social media. I mean, X for what is toxic at the best of times anyway. But the mood at Crawley was so good after Wembley and everything. Everybody was so positive, but then it just started to get a bit toxic again. Words like, "Oh, we're self-destruct." They press the self-destruct button. They don't know what they're doing, etc. And all this aimed at Wagme again. It did get rather negative. But there were a few sensible, level-headed voices just saying this was always going to happen. Crawley are a selling club. No matter what you think, you get promotion. Crawley, it's like a little bit like Brighton. They are a selling club. People will come to Crawley, get developed. They've got a great coaching staff there. Scott Lindsay, arguably one of the best managers in those lower divisions in the EFL. He's got to develop these players and they've got to make money. It is a business, and that's how Wagme are seeing it. You'd like to think, I think Steve Leake wrote a really good column for us this week about their maths model worked last year. Why can't it work again? They've looked at the numbers, I hope they've made a lot of money out of Orsi, Adai and Lolos. And invest that in other players. And it looks like the players they've got so far, barring the Scott Malone one, it looks like it's following the blueprint of last year. Team players that were at academy, good teams at academy level, haven't quite made their names in non-league, and now Crawley have picked them up. And that worked wonders last year. And in fact, this year's transfer window so far does echo last year's. And we all know how last year worked out in the end. So I think I can understand the panic because the fans get to love the players. They build relationships. Orsi, and all of them, Orsi, Adai, Lolos, Wheelwright, Evan, Nick Cerula. We all know how much they love Nick Cerula. But they just had this bond with the Crawley fans last year, and then they were never going to be happy, whoever left. And I just think they just need to calm down a little bit. Yes, it may all go wrong, but that's football, isn't it?
I think you mentioned Mark, there's definitely an emotional attachment. I think probably from the fact that they got promoted and had the party at the Broadfield Stadium, and you really got to see the players, the people behind the players. I guess they weren't just names, and at that point, there was people.
Absolutely,
they're out partying in Crawley High Street with the fans, and I think the Lawrence Maguire one hit hard because he was out partying as well. And
you mentioned Lawrence Maguire,
So I think it's difficult in that sense because they have formed such an attachment to those players and to have gone so quick, and you can kind of understand that. I think there should be a sense of calm. Wait until see what happens and then get angry. If they lose the first 10 games, then you can say what you want, kind of thing. But I wrote a column which I didn't actually put up anywhere because I forgot to in the end. But my last bit was like, well, please be calm. My message is keep calm. They've obviously got a plan. Hopefully it'll work out. But my very last line was, if Scott Lindsay leaves, scrap everything I've just said, then you can start to panic, kind of thing. And at the moment, I just hope Scott Lindsay's there on August the 10th when they kick off against Blackpool.
And also looking at, I know this might be potentially an unpopular opinion amongst Crawley Town fans, but you look at some of the departures, Sam, that have happened. You look at some of the clubs they've gone to, like Clyde Lolos going to Bolton and Adai going to Stockport. When you look at some of these moves, is it really not that much of a surprise? Like Bolton, they've got a big reputation, and equally Stockport, they've got deep pockets. So could you see where I'm coming from?
100%. I think that was always the fear, wasn't it, when Crawley went to Wembley and were obviously on TV and won the game in style, and everyone was talking about how amazing Crawley were. It's a bit like Brighton, isn't it? When people are doing brilliant in Brighton, suddenly they're being linked with the biggest and best clubs and they're off. It's just the same again, just on a slightly lower scale, isn't it, really? It's just you're obviously impressing the world or impressing the country, obviously, on TV, and naturally you're going to get interest because of that. Obviously, as Marcus mentioned, we didn't expect it to happen so quick. We thought maybe they would be kind of slowly going through the transfer window and you lose players one by one. But the fact that obviously some top players all left at once, I think that's probably what's caused some of the outrage, I guess. To lose your top scorer and your young player of the year and our player of the year all in the space of a week, and then obviously Corey Adai was leaving was a real shame because he really struggled to start off with when he first was in the goal for Crawley, and people were questioning whether he was the right man to be in goal for Crawley, and he very quickly proved people wrong, and became one of the best goalkeepers in the league, and provided one of the best moments of the season as well. Obviously, in the playoff semi-final when the ball came back to him, he showed a bit of skill and trickery. And he's another player that fans fell in love with. But yeah, I think absolutely when you've got clubs in the football league with the money they do, it's not necessarily a surprise that they can offer too much money for Crawley to turn down. So yeah, you can completely understand from a business point of view why they needed to take the opportunity now, where their stock is as high as it's ever going to be, and to cash in, and hopefully they reinvest it wisely, and they can build another promotion winning side. You never know, but it'll just be interesting to see what happens with Scott Lindsay, whether he'll see it that way, or whether he'll look at it and think he's just turned a team everyone thought were going to be relegated into promotion to League One. He might be thinking, oh, got to do it all again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
he might be thinking, yeah, sod that, but we'll see. Hopefully he stays and he can do it again.
Just going on that, what you're saying there about taking advantage of their stock's really high. I mean, Danilo Orsi, I hope he has a good season at Burton. I really do, because he's a lovely bloke and he did so well for Crawley this year. But he's only ever had one good season. Yeah. It could be like the shrewdest business, but they could have. The rumours of 500,000, 250,000 for him. I don't know exactly how much it was, but if he goes this season and only scores 2 or 3 goals, only starts half the games or whatever, it looks like an absolute genius move by Wagme to take advantage of that point, kind of thing. So, but that's not to say if he stayed at Crawley, because that's where he fits in, he could have had another 25 goal season. So who knows? But I do wish Danilo all the best, because he is a lovely, lovely bloke.
Has there been any indication that any more players could be departing Broadfield Stadium, Mark? I know that there was one rumour, quite prominent rumour, that was doing around on the Twitter, which by all accounts seems like might not happen.
But Liam Kelly, people were talking about Liam Kelly going to MK Dons, which when I saw it, I just thought that's ridiculous. That's not going to happen, kind of thing. If Liam Kelly's going anywhere, he's going to go to a League One side, you would have thought, because he's that good. I spoke to a contact in Milton Keynes, and he said he'd spoken to the club and there was no truth to it at all. I think they had a bit of fun. They signed somebody on Friday. I can't remember who her name is, Joe somebody. And they had a bit of fun and stirred it up a little bit, pretending I think it was Liam Kelly, or suggested somewhere along the lines it was Liam Kelly. And I think that was just a little bit of payback for getting absolutely trounced in the playoff semi-finals. He's the only other one you can imagine, sort of big name going. I mean, I can't see Jay Williams going anywhere. Well, certainly haven't seen any rumours. But now I think he's got a squad there. Dion Conroy's not going to go anywhere. So I think I think all the big business has been done now. Unless they get a big offer for Liam Kelly from a League One club, which they can't turn down. But if I can imagine, Liam Kelly was at the fixture release breakfast morning, and I thought it would have been unlikely they would have got him along as the player for fans to talk to if he wasn't going to stay.
Well, it's not all doom and gloom, though, as the Reds have announced, last week, 3 new faces. Can you give us a rundown of who they are, Sam, and what they were going to bring to the team?
Yeah. So definitely there's been some good signings made by Crawley. I think one there's been lots of excitement around is Josh Flint, who's a left-sided centre-back. There's been some definite excitement around it. He joins Crawley on an initial 2-year deal following the expiration of his contract at FC Volendam. The 23-year-old was a product of Portsmouth's academy, but his recent experience saw him playing in the Eredivisie, the top tier of the Netherlands. And he's also played for Bognor Regis Town. So, work that one out.
One of Steve Bone's favourites.
One of Steve Bone's favourites, absolutely. But, so he was able to work his way into the first team at FC Volendam and gain plenty of experience at top flight level, making 28 appearances in total last season. And will now link up with Scott Lindsay's Reds. So, that's an exciting one.
I think he's the straight replacement for Lawrence Maguire, playing on the left side of that back three next to Conroy in the centre.
Yes. Charlie Barker, centre-back coming from Wilston on a 3-year deal. And he said he got a few calls from his agent about a few clubs. And as soon as he mentioned Crawley, he was really excited about it and wants to get it done as quick as he could. Broadfield Stadium is a familiar setting for the Barker family, as Charlie's dad managed Crawley. So that's definitely an interesting one. So hopefully he can settle down pretty quickly because of that. But yeah, the 21-year-old began his career with Charlton, where he impressed for the Addicts youth system and earned himself a handful of senior appearances at the age of 17. So yeah, three appearances in League One, and he managed to get a goal in the Carabao Cup match against Swindon for over a year. So I think that's impressive as well for Crawley to get hold of him. So fingers crossed they can do well. And Russian Hepburn Murphy as well has come in from Swindon Town after his contract expired. So he'll be in the club on a 2-year deal. He actually began at Aston Villa's youth academy. So another player that can hopefully use some of his experience from a high level to impress at Crawley. So I think, yeah, there's definitely reason for Crawley fans to be excited, really, in getting these players through the door quickly as well. I think because that was important. After all these departures, they didn't kind of let that negativity settle for too long, and they managed to bring in some names and get the fans excited for the new season. And yeah, hopefully they can settle well, and we can be celebrating another positive season with these new players. That Scott Lindsay, as we know, is perfect at developing players into his system.
And I think Scott Malone, I think, is quite a big signing in the sense of experience, because it's fine getting all these players with potential in, but you do need those. So you've got Liam Kelly now, you've got Dion Conroy, and I think you just needed someone else to add that experience in the dressing room, and Scott Malone seems to be that one. And again, another guy with Crawley connections. And we did a story today with his first interview. Is he married into Crawley. His wife lives in Broadfield. So interesting. There's some good signings there, I think.
And I think the cynic in me would say that they might have hurried along a few of those signings after the week they had with Orsi, Adai and Lolos going in quick succession, but I guess we'll never know, will we? But meanwhile, in further good news, midfielder Jeremy Kelly has committed his future to Crawley Town, signing a new 2-year deal after a successful second half of the 23-24 campaign. How big of a boon is it keeping the American at the club, Sam? It's strange that Crawley have got 2 midfielders with the surname Kelly who have certainly made an impact at the club.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he's one that the fans weren't overly enamoured by when he first came in, and wondering what impact he was going to have at Crawley. And
because he was American, simple as that.
Yeah.
That's why they weren't enamoured with him. But carry on.
Yeah, shocking, really, isn't it? But I think he was really good. The 26-year-old joined the club in January of last year and impressed with his tricky footwork and skill, and made 18 appearances in the regular season, featuring all 3 Sky Bet League 2 playoff matches, which, as we know, ended in glory. So I think he was a key part of that, really. And he was, just such a live wire in those games, really, and was able to quickly turn defence into attack. And it was a real pleasure to watch him. The Kelly duo, I think both of them were superb. And yes, they tied Jeremy down. Fingers crossed they can do the same with Liam as well, because that would be a real coup.
Jeremy Kelly's footwork is incredible. Him and Clyde Lolos, when they were on the ball, it was great to see how quick their feet were. It was incredible. Yeah, looking forward to seeing him again next season.
The Reds have also discovered their fixture itinerary for the 2024-25 League One campaign. Mark Dunford, can you give us the lowdown of the key fixtures, please? And I'll ask both you and Sam this question, but Mark, starting with you, which fixtures stand out the most to you, and which one are you most looking forward to?
I think the obvious one is Birmingham away on Good Friday, because that's the biggest ground. It's a huge ground, and it's just going to be a really good occasion for Crawley fans to go to a ground like that on Good Friday. I think they've only ever played Birmingham once. I think somebody was telling me the other day, and they lost 5-1, so they want to go there and get a bit of revenge. But there's so many games. There's Huddersfield, Wigan, Bolton, all those grounds. Visiting those grounds is going to be incredible for them. But I think one I'm most looking forward to is New Year's Day at home to Charlton. Is sort of the local derby in the competition, and it's going to be a really, really good occasion. New Year's Day is always a good fun. I mean, last year I think they beat Swindon 3-1 on New Year's Day, and hopefully they can do a similar thing against Charlton. But the most underwhelming one is their last game of the season away at Shrewsbury. It's just like, oh, what a disappointment. So it's a shame they're not at home or at a big ground on that last game of the season. But otherwise, but the opener's a really good one. I mean, it's great that they've got a big team coming to the Broadfield Stadium on that first game of the season, because I think if you'd had a smaller team or an away game somewhere like Shrewsbury, no disrespect to them, it would have just been a little bit underwhelming. But having Blackpool at home on that first game of the season is going to be a real occasion, I think.
Although I understand, Mark, that it's not a 3:00 kickoff first game of the season.
No, it's 5:30 and it's on TV as well because there's so many. I think each team is going to be on TV like 20 times this season or something, they said. But yeah, that first game, I think all the League One games are on 5:30 that day, aren't they? And yeah, which is great. It's sort of, I don't know, there's something I quite like about the Saturday 3:00. You can always guarantee Crawley are playing Saturday at 3:00, and there's going to be a few weekends like this year where people try to make plans and then suddenly their game is on a Thursday night, a Saturday morning, a Saturday evening, or even a Sunday, I think somebody was telling me. So it's going to, it could be quite disruptive to some of the fans, but hopefully we'll get to know in advance. But it's great that they're going to get some good TV exposure. It's a shame they didn't have that last season. But yeah, no, it's going to be really, really good for the EFL, hopefully. And hopefully that each club will get their fair share of money from it.
Fingers crossed, quite right too. And Sam, going back to you, which games are you looking forward to most this season for Crawley?
I think, the one that immediately stands out is the opening one against Blackpool. I think the first game in League One is going to be a great atmosphere against a club that's been in the Premier League not too many years ago. So I think, that's immediately one that stands out. And just playing against clubs like this with such rich history and pedigree, really, I think is so great that Crawley are in amongst it now, and hopefully they can really bring out their A game in these games, really. So yeah, can't wait for the season to start.
And finally, Crawley will also host Scott Lindsay's old club Swindon in the first round of the Carabao Cup, and also face Brighton under-21s in their EFL Trophy group, which I think has got AFC Wimbledon and Wickham in it, Mark.
Yeah, that's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
Happy with those draws, Sam? What do you make of them?
Yeah, not bad draws for Crawley, really. Obviously, Swindon was funny one last season, wasn't it? Because when they first played in August, they lost 6-0. And then they came back to the Broadfield Stadium in January and got revenge with a 3-1 win. So, yeah, again, a kind of odd couple of results there in terms of it kind of summed up Crawley's progression, I guess, as the season went along. But yeah, I think it'll be good for Scott Lindsay to go back to his old stomping ground and hopefully get a win there. And yeah, it's always good playing against the Brighton under-21s and be a good test because obviously they're at a Premier League club's academy for a reason. They've got some real talent there as well. So yeah, two good games to look forward to.
And just on the EFL Trophy, I think it was such an important competition for Crawley last year because they got quite far and they got to blood a load of players, the likes of Joy McKenna, who almost became a first team regular towards the end of the season, did really well. He wouldn't have started those games at the end of the season if he hadn't have played all those games in the EFL Trophy. And because they haven't got a reserves and under-21s, a youth academy or anything, Crawley, it's such an important thing, competition for them to get these youngsters with potential. Someone like, I don't know if Charlie Barker's in his mind as a starter in the league, but if he's not, he will be starting in the EFL Trophy. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they develop in that competition this year.
Absolutely. Much maligned, that trophy, but there does seem to be a reason for it for some clubs, doesn't there, Mark?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Speaking of much maligned, England plays Switzerland in the quarterfinals of the Euros. Normally we do Brighton or Crawley score predictions, but as England are on, we thought we'd have a quick whip round and see what you think is going to happen on Saturday, I believe. Mark, starting with you, how do you see that one going?
Oh, it's going to be exactly the same as the previous ones. It's going to be painful. People are not going to enjoy it. People are going to be doing their nutting. They're going to lose their minds, and then England are going to win 1-0 with a late goal, and everything will be rosy again until the next game. I think people just need to calm down. We're never going to play wonderful football under Gareth Southgate. If we're going to keep winning, though, just be happy with that.
Absolutely. Sam, do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a tough game. Yeah, it's a really tough game. Switzerland have been one of the best teams in the competition so far. I think, in my opinion, I think they've been really good. Look like a real good team. Yeah, I think England have really got to improve in terms of the performances. I think getting an early goal, settle the nerves, because the longer it stays 0-0 and or concede, it just gets nervy. And I think it doesn't help. It doesn't help. Obviously, I think there's so much pressure and whatnot on England. I think they need an early goal or two to settle those nerves. But yeah, we've discussed it before. But Mark Gahey not being there is a big one because he's been really good. So interesting to see who comes in for him. And you never know, Lewis Dunk might finally get that appearance.
Henry, how do you think England are going to get on, and who do you see playing at the back instead of Gay?
Well, as a Brighton fan, I've got to say Lewis Dunk. I wouldn't be doing my service if I didn't say Lewis Dunk. But as Sam mentioned, just to echo that point, Gahey's been playing really well. And I think he's put in an absolute shift for England. And some of the blocks he's made have just been absolutely fantastic. The way he's just slotted into the side, just looks like he's got this certain pedigree that we need as, for an England defender. And we always did speak about, as mates. My mates said, I'm not sure who we've got at the back who can actually put in a shift, and I think he really has. So it'd be a big miss.
He got the assist as well, didn't he, for Bellingham?
Yeah.
Didn't he flick on for Bellingham? Yeah.
So he's been absolutely fantastic. It's been really great to see. I think that it'll be 2-1 to England. I think that Switzerland will score first. The form that they've been in has been remarkable. I think it's
Matt's heart can't take it.
Oh, I don't think I could be doing with Switzerland scoring first, Henry.
There was a gasp then.
If England get that early goal, I think they'll go on to win 2-0. But yeah, the longer it stays 0-0 or they concede, I fear the worst because, as I say, Switzerland are a very good team.
Yeah.
Can I admit something that might seem quite unpopular? When it was in the 95th minute and England were 1-0 down, I actually felt quite relieved that they were going out because I thought, I don't have to watch this anymore. I don't have to care about this.
I understand that mentality. I really do. I was sitting there going, oh, well, let's all move on.
No, they'll turn it on now on Saturday, won't they? After we slagged them off. But anyway, fingers crossed. Come on, England. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. You can catch up with all the latest sports news covering everything we've talked about today at sussexworld.co.uk, and you can watch more excellent videos on shotstv.com and Freeview channel 276. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and we will see you when we see you.
Cheers.